Okay, so basement walls, foundation walls, right? Um, let's talk about how to generate those, right? Our basement walls are going to go obviously all the way around the perimeter of our home. And then without getting into a lot more in specialized areas within the house if there's a bearing wall, right? But we're just going to talk about kind of creating a foundation wall that kind of lives underneath the main wall of the home, okay? Essentially, any exterior wall that you have, we're going to say you need to have a foundation under it, obviously. All right, so I'm going to go into my elevation views here. Ooh, they all look very messy, right? I'm going to drag all these back in so that they look nice and neat and lined up. Okay, and I have a few things specified here. I've got my level 1, I have my bottom of structure. Maybe I make my bottom, yeah, that looks good. Big basement, let's not make it maybe so far away. Let's do maybe negative 10 foot. And these are not going to be real because I'm going to exaggerate them. But let's say maybe I'll talk about this one in a second, but we'll do a gigantic footing. There we go. Oops. There we go. Okay. All right, so I think the way that I think that I'm going to show you how to do footings and foundations in our drawings, there are other ways to do them. And you'll see these different ways of doing them in offices. But I think having, done it this way in an office setting makes them a lot more editable than other ways, right? Other ways meaning under the structure tab here, we have a footing kind of a foundation and footing wall option here, right? We also have a slab option here, okay? And these tools are really simple to use. Like we create a foundation wall and then you can use this tool and just pop a footing all the way around. Really simple, no definition. But there's a couple things that are kind of problematic with these. Number one, these are actual structural items, right? So they're not considered, quote, an architectural item, right? And when we're drawing architectural drawings, there's a big difference between our set of drawings and an engineered set of drawings, right? And it really just kind of comes down to liability, essentially. This topic I'm just going to talk about now is the reason why in AutoCAD we separate our layers out so that we know whose stuff is whose, essentially, right? And who generated it and who's responsible for it, okay? So structural engineers are liable for all of their work, right? We're liable for all of our work. And, whoever you are, you're liable for your work, essentially. When I use a structural element in here and you're drawing architectural drawings, it can be kind of confusing as to who drew them, right? Because it's, quote, a structural object. It's not an architecturally defined object, okay? So if I filter out that object through my visual graphics, which is similar to my layering system, you could say, well, who drew this? Well, it was the architect. Well, oh, but it's a structural item. Are you sure it wasn't the structural engineer, right? So there's some question there, right? So that's one reason I kind of tend to stay away from these structural objects, even though they're very easy to use, right? And we're capable of using them. The other reason I kind of stay away from them is because once you put like a structural footing in there, it's a little harder to manipulate and change once it's in, okay? And so I, again, tend to stay away from it because we're constantly changing our drawings. We're making things taller and wider and, we're fine-tuning dimensions. And so I want to be able to fine-tune things really easily. And some of these structural items, once you create them, they're hard to recreate or to change, right? You essentially have to recreate them to get them the size you want, right? And I would rather just select all my footings and change the size rather than deleting them and recreating them, okay? So you might see this happening, if it's office standard where you work, great, but I'm going to tend to stay away from them, okay? So to create a footing and foundation system underneath your projects, which you're going to have to do, right? And in an architectural drawing set, you think, well, you do have to draw footings and foundations, even though they will be specified by the structural engineer. And the reason we do it is so that we can show design intent of the space below, so that we can define the building envelope, right? And essentially kind of tell the structural engineer, you know, where we want these things to happen, and then they engineer them, right? They fine tune them. We make our best guess as to how big items are going to be. Like in general, a foundation wall, you know, can be 8, 10, or 12 inches, right? And the engineer may say, well, we want a 10-inch one in this case. Okay, great, right? And we can fine tune things. So we do have to show them for design intent and depths and spatial enclosure and all that good stuff, okay? So you have in your models a lot of these levels already defined, right? So I'm in a north view in my model right now, and I have a roof level defined here, which probably actually should be top of wall, right? And I'm going to generate a new level called roof, which is barely below. Okay, so this is going to be called roof. Okay, so roof, top of wall, level 2. I'll have level 2 bottom of structure, which I'm not going to put in. Level 1, bottom of structure. I have a basement level. Another level you're going to add to your Revit drawings will be called bottom of footing, okay? Because we are going to draw our footing from our level 1 down to our basement, and then we're going to draw our footing from our basement down to our bottom of footing, okay? So I think probably the best way that I've found to draw these, kind of the easiest way, is to actually draw my foundation walls in the floor plan, right? You can draw them from the basement level, but you can look up at the floor plan and see an overlay of it, but I just kind of think that drawing your foundation walls from level 1 and then kind of putting them in the exact right spot is the easiest way of going about it, okay? So with my levels defined, with all of the, you know, right settings that I need, I'm going to go back into my floor plan view, my level 1. Okay, so here's my beautiful little floor plan. I don't have a actual floor in here. Let me put a floor in here real quick. Floor, architectural, and I'll go by wall, generic 12-inch floor, click, click. Everything is so easy in Revit, isn't it? Finish, and I'll just, again, I always go into 3D, make sure there's my floor. Looks good. Okay. So a foundation wall is actually a wall. It's a wall type, right? And it is defined as a foundation wall. You know, we kind of, I think, talked about interior, exterior walls. Well, we also have a defined foundation wall. So when I go to walls, architectural, right, I have my exterior walls, I have my interior walls, I have generic walls, and then I have, I'm going to not worry about that one yet, but I have a foundation wall generated here. Okay, so I'm going to click on foundation wall, and this foundation wall is just like any other wall type that you have in Revit, where if you want to create a new one, right, you choose the one that is most similar to the one you want to edit, you hit edit type, you hit edit structure, right? And foundation walls are generally pretty easy, right? They're cast in place concrete. The structure is here in between the core boundaries as it should be, and I could change the dimension of it, right, to 1 foot 4 or whatever it needs to be, okay? All right, so I've got my foundation wall defined. I'm ready to draw, okay? And I'm going to now define my foundation wall, okay? And I want the upper level, the top constraint of this foundation wall to be level 1, right? This is almost kind of going, you need to think about foundation walls kind of backwards, because we're drawing it from the main level, right? But we're defining it from the main level kind of growing down instead of from the main level growing up, right? So we do still have a base and a top constraint, but it's kind of moving in the downward direction as opposed to the upward direction, essentially. So I have my base constraint and I have my top constraint. My top constraint will still be level 1. My base constraint is going to be that basement level that I generated, okay? And that's really kind of all I need to do at this point. And I'm going to change my location line. Remember, that's where you draw your wall from, right? To the finish face exterior, because in this case I want my exterior walls to line up. I'll show you a little error that might happen when I do that. I want them chained and I don't want them offset, okay? So being on my main level, I'm just going to start drawing. Hold on, let me do one thing real quick. I got all the way through that and I thought, you know what, I'm going to put my 3D view. I want to put my 3D view on the same window as what I'm doing. Okay. All right. So everything, start my wall again, finish face. Oh, let's see, base constraint is basement, top constraint is level 1. Chain, finish face, exterior. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I come over here and I start drawing my foundation wall. Okay, and you can start seeing it over there generating. Or you could. Looks good. All right, so the reason I put that 3D view in there is because I wanted to make sure my wall was the right orientation, that I didn't need to flip it essentially, right? So I'm continuing to draw, click, and I just draw around the perimeter of my floor plan. And I panic a little because I get an error and it says none of the elements are visible, none of the created elements are visible in my floor plan. Level 1, you may want to check your active view, its parameters and visibility settings. And that's okay because I know that these walls, these foundation walls, they shouldn't be visible on level 1. They should be visible on the basement level. So when I get that error, I essentially kind of know that I'm doing something right because the foundation walls are going in where they need to go. Okay, I'm back at the beginning, I hit escape, and I look over here and I've got these wonderful foundation walls occurring. Okay, I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to undo all of those and show you what if I had done something wrong, right? What if I had not gotten the orientation quite right? What if they were slightly off dimension? How would we kind of fix that, right? So I'm in my floor plan level again, and I click on wall, and it's remembering the settings from my previous, drawing session. But instead of choosing finish face exterior, maybe I choose wall center line, and I want to use a pick to generate these. So I start clicking here, and I do see that the walls are generating below the main level, which is a good sign, right? But I do also see that maybe they're not quite in line with the face of the brick, right? And so I'm thinking, oh great, I just drew all those foundation walls and I actually got them to work, and they're, they're where they need to be, but they don't line up with the exterior wall, right? Or there's some other dimensional thing happening. You can use a line in 3D to get these objects to align to one another, okay? So I think you're probably all used to using the align tool to get objects on your floor plans, to align in 2D. But I want to get you used to the idea that you can align things in 3D, right? So if this face needs to align with this face, right, I can align those things in 3D. I'm going to go up to modify. See, I know everybody's doing it right because I keep hearing the little pings like your walls are not visible on the current view. I'm going to go to align, AL, or I could click on align. I'm going to click. Do you see how I'm grabbing the face? It looks like I'm clicking kind of a boundary, but I'm actually on the face of this wall, this upper wall. If I tab, do you see how it gets the other side? And then sometimes it'll grab the midpoint. But as I hover over this, I get the face, and I click, and it highlights the face of that first wall. And then I kind of come over here, and I hover near a boundary, but I get the entire wall. And I click, and it pops out and aligns. Okay. I would say that of all the walls that I usually generate, I would say 99% of the time I have to align my foundation walls after I generate them. Okay. And then you're just going to go around, AL, click, and you hover maybe near a boundary, click, and it aligns, right? AL, click, and click. Okay. AL, click, oop, AL, click, click, there we go. So we just go all the way around. Luckily I don't have very many walls. Click, click, make sure I get it on the right plane. There you go. And my project looks beautiful, right? I've got my foundation, the brick is sitting right on the foundation, you know, maybe that's how I wanted it, whatever, but it looks pretty good, okay? So now what that does is that when I look at one of my other elevations, right, now essentially I've enclosed a basement space, right? So at this point I could add a floor into that basement if I wanted to, right? And I have a basement level defined here, and so I can go to basement, and I could create, you know, a concrete slab in my basement. So I go up here to architecture, I go to floor, architectural floor, and now you're probably, let me exit out of this, but now you're probably noticing when I go to floor, we have all these other floors like structural floor, right? And maybe it makes sense why we choose an actual architectural floor as opposed to a structural floor, right? Even though in your mind you're probably thinking, well, floors are structural, so why do I choose one over the other, right? And it just really depends on who's drawing it. So floor architectural, in the basement I want a slab, right? Concrete slab. So, well, I'm not going to create a new wall type or new floor type, so I'm just going to choose this one just to be lazy. And I'm going to draw my floor in. Sometimes I choose a pick option, sometimes I choose a wall, sometimes I choose using the actual drawing commands, right? None of them are better or more right than the other. It's just a matter of what you're more comfortable with, right? Whatever works for you, you can use. I'm going to hit finish, and I've got my floor in there, right? Again, my habit, I always pop into 3D, and now that my floor is enclosed, my space is enclosed, right? I can't really see into the space, so my 3D is not helping me very much, and so now I need to probably start looking at a sectional view, okay? So I'm going to go to my level, or basement, sorry, and I'm going to look at a sectional view of this to see if it is working correctly. I know it just sounds really, you're like, oh yeah, I know it's working, right? But you know, double checking things and making sure that they're actually where they need to be is really key in Revit, honestly, right? Because things can kind of get off track really easily. So I always go and make sure that things are where they need to be. Okay. Well, I'm going to have my footing sitting right underneath my foundation wall. So right now I look at this and I think, well, my slab's in the wrong spot, right? It needs to be sitting, the bottom of the slab needs to be sitting on top of the basement floor level, right? All right, great. So I click on it, and I don't know what thickness this floor is defined as. Let's look. Oh, well, let's just get rid of that. Delete. 4 inches. Great, perfect. Okay, so the floor actually needs to sit up on top of the basement level. So I'm going to select the basement floor. I'm going to say height offset from level 4 inches. Okay, so now my floor is in the right spot. Okay, there's kind of a you know, there's kind of a balance between, do I actually create a level that's called top of basement slab? Or is it, in this case, is it good practice just to say, oh, I'm going to offset my slab up 4 inches, right? You don't want to get in the habit of defining objects in Revit and not defining them as they should be and just using an offset, right? You want to define them appropriately and correctly as much as possible. But in this case, it kind of makes sense. It's one object, and there's not going to be really anything else that you're gonna have to worry about with this. It's okay to offset it, right? You don't need to create a new level for top of slab, okay, essentially. All right, so we have our slab here, and you know, I'm gonna make some gigantic footings so that we can see them. Maybe 3 feet's too, do you think 3 feet's too big? We'll do 2 feet, so you can actually see them, okay? All right, so those are my foundation walls, and they come up, right, and they meet this upper level here, right? Really, they're going to be kind of coming down likely and resting to bottom of structure here, right? And then you're going to have your wall, you know, sitting on top of that. We're not going to worry about that just yet. I'm going to not worry about that for you guys and just let you kind of make them look like this, okay? If we have enough time at the end, I'll show you how to deal with this. I think we will have enough time at the end, so we'll deal with this condition at the end of the course. But how do we make foundation walls now, or footings, right? So they're going to be a wall type as well, right? Now, again, you will see your a footing tool in the structural tab. Don't use that, okay? We are going to create a wall type that is a footing, essentially, right? Jen, is this how you guys learned how to do it? Did you learn, how do you add your footings to your drawings?
The footings to the drawings?
Is it a wall type for you? I'm just curious.
No, he had us twist it underneath so you could see the walls and then just click, click, click.
Oh, okay.
Do it that way and then just adjust.
Okay.
The size you want. That's how nice to him.
So Kevin goes the opposite direction than I go. Okay, good to know. We'll have to have a little discussion about that, right? Okay, so we're going to create some footing walls here. So we'll just make them, you know, again, the structural engineer is going to be key in helping you generate your footings, right? What thickness they are and what height they are, right? You can have a, you know, 10, 12, whatever. Some footings are really large, some are really small, but we can have a 10-inch or 10-inch thick footing, and then maybe we have it 24 inches wide or whatever, right? But you'll work with your structural engineer to determine what your footing size is, okay? But essentially we need to have our wall, we're gonna create a wall type for our footings, and the wall type, you're gonna make the thickness of your wall. So this dimension, right? It's gonna be very thick. So if this is, how thick is this? 12 inches. Let's add 8 inches on either side of that, so 16 inches, so 28 inches. We'll have a 28-inch thick footing, right? Write that down. If you had an 8-inch concrete wall, you know, for your foundation, maybe it would be, you know, 2 feet wide or whatever, okay? So our wall type for our footing will have a very thick wall type, and then the height is going to be determined by your levels here, right, essentially. So you're going to have a base constraint that is a level that's called bottom of footing, and then you'll have a top constraint called basement, okay? So that's how we're going to define our footings. All right. So I'm going to come in here, and I usually will just kind of start, if I don't have a footing created, a footing wall type created, I'll usually just start with foundation wall, hit edit type, duplicate, and we'll just leave it as foundation, but we'll call it footing 28 inches. Okay. I'm going to hit edit type. And instead of the thickness being a foot, it's going to be 28 inches. Gigantic, right? Over at the aviary, I guess there's not good soil. When I was at AJC, we had these gigantic footings. They were like 3 feet wide, 4 foot wide or something, and they were like 2 feet thick because of the soil over there. It's pretty intense. All right, so we have our footing wall defined as concrete, and they're 2 foot 4 inches thick. And I just changed my foundation wall. MA, match properties, click, click, magically fixed. All right, so I drew my foundation wall. I think the easiest way to go about it is from level 1, kind of looking down, and they draw that direction, right? And I also think that the easiest way for my basement walls in thinking is to open up my basement level and draw my footings from my basement level, right? I've done this all sorts of ways, and again, it seems counterintuitive because you don't see the items as they're generating, which seems weird, but I think all in all, it really does end up being easier. So I'm going to go to my basement level, click, click. And I'm going to open up my 3D level, my 3D view at the same time, WT. So I have my foundation there, right? Here's my basement plan. And I'm going to come up and go to my wall type, my footing wall type. 28 inches, great. I'm going to define the base constraint to be the bottom of footing and the top constraint to be the basement. I'm going to use my pick tool, and I do want these to be center line on the foundation, so that works. I don't want an offset. So I'm going to zoom in here, click. And again, I get that error. These objects are not viewable in the current, view settings. This is key. You're going to be successful if you have your 3D view here and you have your floor plan here, okay? If you don't, you're gonna, it's not hard. These aren't hard, but you're gonna get confused. You'll kind of lose track of what you've made and what you haven't, and are they generating on the right plane of the wall, and am I drawing, so just, for ease of drawing these things, put them on the same window. There's my nice big gigantic footing. Let me undo that and I'll redo it again. Okay, so I created a wall type, right? I went into wall and I created a new wall type, and it's under the foundation category, but it's called footing 28 inches. And that is going to be the width of your footing. The height of the footing is going to be defined by the levels. Yep.
How did you calculate that 28 inches again?
I kind of just made this one up. It's not real, but it's essentially, you'll work with your engineer on the thickness, but you could say the thickness of the wall plus 8 inches on either side. Yeah. Okay. I hit edit structure and you would choose a thickness. Okay. So that is the width of my wall, even though it says thickness, right, in my thing there, it's the width of the wall. Okay. So I've generated my foundation wall. Great. To draw my foundation wall or my footing wall, I think the best way of going about it, even though it sounds counterintuitive, is to go to the basement floor plan, to open up a 3D view over here, okay, and to start drawing this direction, okay. So the way that, well, I'm not going to go into that, never mind, that'll be confusing. All right, so let me create these objects. All right, I'm going to come back up here to wall. I'm going to choose wall center line as my drawing method because the footing's generally going to be centered on the foundation wall, right? And I'm going to define my base constraint as the bottom of the footing. So that's the base, the bottom of the footing. The top constraint is the basement. Okay. I come back over here and oh, I don't think I ever started my wall. Where's my wall at? Here we go, right? So, and if I can't hit the middle point, right, I'm stuck on the outer, I can tab, and it picks the midpoint, click. And we know good things are happening when we start to get those errors dinging, right? You cannot see this. Doesn't mean it's not there, right? Click, click, click. And I have my footings, okay? Number one thing that I see happening with student work and footings and foundations, number one error I see is that, and this varies from project to project, but in our case, we probably just want the foundation and the exterior wall to line up. Number one thing I see is misalignment of foundation and exterior wall, right? So just for our class, to make it easy, just make sure your footing is right in line with the face. These two faces are right in line with one another. And, make sure that your footing is center line on top of your, underneath your foundation wall. This is a good time to admire your models, right? Like, wow, look, I built a little house. It's so cute. Okay. Feel proud, people. Feel proud. All right, so we have our footing, we have our foundation wall. Everything looks really good. If I want to view this a little bit better, I can go in and look at a sectional view. Click, click. And I see that everything is working. I've got my slab sitting where it needs to be. I've got my gigantic footing, right? And what's really nice about this now is that if I needed to change the depth of this footing, maybe make it like 11 feet, all I have to do is change the level and it's adjusted, right? If I needed to change the width of this wall, right, I could come up here and hit edit type and change the width of the wall, and it would change it, right? There's, you know, this is why this system works really well. It's a little bit more work to define everything and to get it in place, but it's so easily manipulated that it makes it worth it, right? And I don't know, you know, you get into this profession and it's like everything is rush, 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 now, 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 and so, you know, you want to do things the best way you can and the quickest way. Okay, so we have our little house here. Let's add some topos. Any questions on the foundation wall? You're going to add a foundation wall and a footing, right, and a slab in the basement to your, to your midterms.
Need to get mine to extend. It's the right width, but it's not sticking out past the actual foundation.
Okay, so maybe what has happened is that you drew yours, is it kind of maybe looking like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you probably drew from the finished face exterior, which is fine, right? We can go back and change these. The way that you're going to be able to get these back in alignment is to use a line. So you're going to have to go into a sectional view, okay? So cut a section through, and then you're going to type AL, align, click the midpoint of that foundation wall, and then click the midpoint of that footing, and they align. If you want to try and get comfortable with doing that in a 3D view, right? It's a little more tricky, but you guys can get used to it. I can type AL, align, and I'm gonna have to hover on the outside edge of my wall, tab, and I think I'm getting the AL, I'm gonna try and get the midpoint. Tab, tab, okay, that's what the midpoint of the wall looks like. Click, and then I'm gonna grab the midpoint of this footing by tab, click, and it aligned that direction too. So if you don't want to cut it, if you've done all of your walls incorrectly and you want to not have to cut 8 sections, right, to view them in sectional view, you can do it in 3D. Did that help?
Yeah, it's just every time I hit tab, it's selecting all and not the
Oh, okay. So if you, let's see. So are you in floor plan view? Or
well, both.
3D. Okay, so in your 3D view, that can happen, right? See, if I tab now, it does that. If I indicate that and move just a little bit, now it's doing, I think it's just the view I'm in. I'm going to toggle so it's a little bit more angled like that. Now tab, tab. Okay, there we go, finally, right? It might just be the way, the angle that you're looking at, or maybe make it a little bit more like that so that you're seeing the bottom. I'm going to move my mouse a little. Oh, I moved towards the corner. Now, see how I was getting the same thing too. It's really, you're going to get the hang of how to select, but for me, I'm like, oh, it's chaining the walls. Okay, well, shoot. I move my mouse a little, tab, tab. I move my mouse a little, to tab, tab, till I can kind of get where I need to go. If it doesn't work up there, you know, I kind of, you know, move this direction and then I tab, tab. Well, it worked the first time. Now I'm just getting... I know it's going to work, right? I'm going to move towards the edge here a little bit. Tab, tab. Oh, come on. Oh, there. No, no. I think you've jinxed me. We'll go maybe more in this direction. You might just have to, if you can't get it to work, which whatever reason I got it to work. Oh, maybe because I already fixed it. That might be why. Maybe? No, probably not. You may just end up wanting to cut a section, right? And then just delete the section when you're done. All right, so we have our foundation walls, right? You can use a line on them. They can be a little bit of work, but once you have them in place, you know, they function very well. Let's add some topography. Let's add some topos into this little project, right? I'm going to go to my site plan, and I want this to be 1 to 10. Where is it? 20. Oh, I don't. Oh, yeah, there it is. I'm going to do a blue, like essentially a blue selection window. Grab my base and survey point and hide those for now. Here's my little house. I've got my elevations around. I need to add some topography, okay? And actually, I don't quite remember which direction my house goes. So I'm just going to cut a section and look at it real quick. Okay. That's my window. Okay. Good. And I'm going to leave this section because we'll be looking at it after I create my topo surface anyway. All right, looks pretty good here, right? I'm going to add some topos. So I'm going to come over here to massing and site, and I'm going to come up here to my topo surface, click, and I'm going to create my topo surface by placing points, right? And I'm going to start at a 0 elevation. I might make it go up and down a little bit as I create it, just for fun, right? But I'm going to start it out here at the edge so I can encompass all of my building. There's my 0 marker. Now I need to generate some movement from here this direction, so I'm going to change my elevation to 3 feet and start generating some topos at 3 feet. Oh, okay. Oh, that was 3 inches. Well, 3 inches. And then we'll maybe go -2 foot. I'll make this kind of wonky. Here we go. And then maybe we'll make it slope up a lot to maybe 4 foot above our elevation. Ooh, we're getting some good things happening here. In fact, we'll take it all the way halfway through. And then we'll slope it up even more, maybe to 10 foot. Is anybody an excavator in here? Then we'll make it even steeper. We'll make it 20 feet. We'll make this really steep. This must be out in Harriman somewhere where there's... Our project house in Harriman one time didn't work because it was like a giant steep. And we only had like a 4-foot backyard in it. It's terrible. Anyway. Okay, so we've got this wonderful topography going. I'm finished creating it. I hit finish. Let's look at it in 3D. It's going to be really weird, probably. Look at that. Not too bad, huh? And let's look at a sectional view of it. Okay. Oh, it even goes up past the front door, doesn't it? I'm going to move it down just a little bit so that doesn't happen. And then we'll talk about... You just wish you could do that in real life. I'm going to talk about how to filter out all of this topography in the building, right? We all kind of know how to do this at this point. But I'm going to do it one more time, and I'm going to show you how to correct some settings in your topography. So I'm going to go back to my site plan here. And you notice I come up here all the time and I click on this close hidden window, right? And I close hidden window so that I only have the current drawing open, so that if I want to open something else and tile them next to each other, then I already kind of have those windows closed, right? And they'll pop up next to each other very easily. But essentially, to filter out the earth from my building, I'm going to use a building pad, okay? So I'm going to go to a wireframe view so I can see the outline of my building. And I'm going to click on building pad. And I want the building pad not to be at level 1, I want it to be at my basement level. And I'm going to draw a boundary line all the way around the edge, the outside edge of my foundation, because I want the earth to stop at my foundation and not encroach on it. Yep.
Sorry, where was building pad?
Oh, let's do it. Let's look. It is right there. Yep, building pad. Okay, so click, click, and this will filter out all of that earth inside of my project here, right? And I want this building pad to be defined at basement level so that none of the earth comes in. One thing we didn't talk about yesterday was that you can format your building pad to be a certain thickness, and it kind of makes sense that it's the same thickness as your lower level slab maybe, right? So that it sits right in line with your slab. So if you forget to turn it off, you don't see the lines of it, okay? So I'm going to hit edit type here, and I'm going to change this to be 4 inches. Let's change it to concrete so we can't see it. Okay. Hit finish. Okay. So I'm going to look at my section cut, and I've got my building pad here. I'm going to move it up just so it's in line with that. Okay. Now what's nice about this, right, is that I don't see my topography now coming into my building, right? It is very nicely coming up to it. It is very nicely, you know, sitting right up against the foundation wall as it should, all right? I do have one problem, however, and that is that because my, you know, such a steep slope here, and I aligned my building pad with the bottom of my building here, and my basement is really kind of deep in the ground, my topography is not extending past my building, right? And so we want that to show. Obviously, we created the topo surface so that we could get a good indication of that in here, right? So I need to change some of the settings of my topography here, okay? And I'm going to come up here to all right. I'm going to come up here, and I've got my I've got a little flyout menu here under model site. This is such a convoluted area. It's just really hidden, I guess. The setting is really hidden. I have a little flyout here that says model site, okay? And essentially there are settings having to do with your topo surface in here, right? So contours and different things like that. I'm not going to worry about that just yet. It's a little bit advanced. But what I do want you to notice is right here it says the section cut of the material for your topo surface. It's going -10 feet below the base of your surface. All right. So that means that after 10 feet, that topo surface stops showing, right? And that's why it's stopped. Okay. This is honestly, this is one of those settings that you're going to need, and every time you need to use it, you'll forget where it's at, and you'll have to look it up probably. But just know that it is here. And so I can type in something like -50 feet, and I exaggerate it so that if for whatever reason I need to pull my boundary way down below the house, that poche is going to show. Okay, I hit apply, I hit OK.
Where's the command to open that again?
You come up here to your massing and site, and it's this little flyout menu. Yeah, -50. Mm-hmm.
So when you draw your building pad, are you drawing it to the exterior foundation wall or the foundation?
Yes, I was just going to get to that topic. Okay, I'll get to that topic. Yep. All right. So I have my topos drawn, right? And now they extend past my building. Looks really good. I'll come to that topic in a second, Anna. But, you know, I can go into 3D. I can see it. It does still look somewhat like a, you know, a flat plane, which it kind of is. Clients don't like to see their site as a flat plane because they don't know how Revit works, right? And they panic every time they see this. Wait a minute, I can see my building under there, you know. So if you want to have a thickness around this building, you'll have to turn your section region on, your section box, and you'll have to engage the edge of that topo surface. Clients relate much better to this, right? There you go. Let me tell you the best part about this. The best part about Revit is that you can draw these projects in Revit, and you can put in doors and windows and topography and all this complicated stuff, right? And you can export this and open it in SketchUp, right? Does anybody use SketchUp in here? If you don't, you should. It's magical. You can render from Revit, but SketchUp is very easy, right? SketchUp it's a CAD program, it's a computer-aided drafting program, but it's more, I would say, user-friendly than a lot of actual, you know, drawing, you know, construction drawing generating CAD programs. So in SketchUp, it's made to create massing very quickly. So push and pull and move and rotate, those kind of things. It also has some artistic filters in it. So if you want to make this look hand sketched, or if you want it to look like you color penciled it, and you want to show a client a very loose rendering of your Revit model very quickly, right? Without having to enter all of the rendering settings into Revit, you could take this model, export it, open it in SketchUp, and it works really well, right? It has a lot of integrity. All of these pieces are components in SketchUp, so they come in very nicely. And you can bring your topography in there and make it look like Earth, okay? So that's what I most like about this. I can generate a building, I can be designing, and I can take it into SketchUp to visually show a client, and then I can come back to a program that has integrity and finish drawing it, right? I guess my point with that is SketchUp doesn't have any integrity as a drafting program, right? It's much more of a visual program. And so if you create a SketchUp model, and then you want to actually create drawings to build from, you're doing two separate builds, right? You're building in SketchUp, and then you're building in Revit, and it's kind of a waste of time, right? So what's nice about this is that you can double up on the work essentially, okay? All right, so I have my building, I have my beautiful topos, it looks wonderful, right? You can engage the bottom of this as well, I believe, yep. But it's kind of cutting off my basement, so, but I think that's pretty effective for a client to see, right? Looks pretty good. So, one thing we talked about last time too, I'm gonna hide this, is that you can take these 3D views, right? And a 3D view is a view over here in my project browser, 3D. I can right click and choose duplicate, okay? And that becomes a view just like a floor plan would. And I can come down and I can create a sheet. And I can pull these sheets on, the views onto a sheet, right? So if I wanted to show a client some 3D, you know, exterior shots, it's really easy to do that, right? Okay, I'm gonna go back to my 3D, my main 3D view, which is the default view when you click on this icon. All right, so Anna's question was, where exactly, oh my gosh, your screen is so blurry. Has it always been like that? Did we talk about this? We need to tell Jameson it's blurry like that. That's awful. Anna's question was, well, you know, this is all great. I'm going to go into a section here real quick. But where do I put my building pad exactly, right? Where do I put that building pad? Because, and it's not really, this one is not too bad actually. But there will be times when, you know, I put my building pad right here, right? And that means that the earth in my topo surface comes up, comes up, and actually stops at the bottom of that building pad, right? And what that means is that this footing is still essentially kind of encased in earth, right, in Revit. And right now it's working for whatever reason. But a lot of times you'll get this earth hatch over the top of your footing, right? And I don't really have a good solution for that, honestly. I think that it's probably good. I mean, you can bring the earth all the way to the bottom of the footing or a foundation wall here, put your pad there, and the earth comes all the way up, right? And then in the end, when we create these for construction drawings, to make it graphically look correct, if the earth is, you know, the hatch is showing up over your footing, we'll just put a filled region, right? Which we haven't talked about yet. But we can fake in, you know, and make it look like concrete, okay? So there's one solution. You could move the building pad down, right? And you could extend it kind of over here, and you can make it thicker so that kind of this whole area beneath your slab is blank, right? So I could hit edit type, whoops. Oh, I think I moved my slab. There we go. I can move the building pad down, and now essentially, well, it's not blank, it's showing the footing beyond, right? But it's not showing earth. And I changed this to look like concrete, so I could make it invisible or hide it or whatever. But you could do this as well. And then you could use, again, we haven't learned about detail components, we're not there yet, but you could use detail components that show like the gravel, you know, the layer of gravel underneath your footing or your slab, right? And that kind of obscures part of this. And then maybe you have to fake in another filled region that shows earth underneath that, right? Either way, you're going to have to do a little bit more graphic work to make your section look right. So, you know, for me, I think that, I mean, I don't know the best solution. This is a pretty good solution because it stops at the foundation, and I can just put a layer of gravel coursing there and do a filled region, and it looks pretty good, right? And what I kind of, excuse me, like about even if I have to put a filled region over this, I can make the boundary look really thick, which I kind of enjoy graphically, right? So maybe if I were to choose, I would probably put the building pad right in line with your concrete slab. All right, any questions so far?
Is the building pad an actual object, or is it just kind of, it is an object? Okay.
Yeah, it is an object. It lives in here, right? Well, let me grab it. It lives in here, and you can isolate it and look at it in 3D. And I don't know why you couldn't, like, maybe give a dual use to the floor slab and say this can be a building pad, right? And it filters out the topos. I don't understand why they don't let you do that, but they don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So my building pad showing up below the floor.
Move it. Yep, drag it up. Or, so first thing, right, I guess I shouldn't say that. If you click on it, right, and you look at it, make sure it is where it's on the appropriate level, right? And then if you needed to move it up or down a little bit, you know, I'm gonna tab and select it. And MV is move, right? And I'm just gonna move it if it needs to be adjusted a little bit. I'm not very worried about the building pad and moving it up and down because really it will generally stay in place, and it's not a building element that I need to worry about. Okay, just a couple more things about our you know, our topography and how it interacts with our project and our footings and foundations and things. One thing about our topography that's kind of nice and kind of not at the same time is that you know, it shows graphically correct and everything, right? And so if I have, let me close this out and go to my building section. Oh, no, I want to go to my floor plan, sorry. Okay. So if I'm at my site plan. So if I have a building section here and I click on it, it shows me right here, you know, the extent of how far this building section is going. And because my building section starts here and goes out all that way, all of that topography is being shown behind my section, right? So I'm seeing the contour and how it kind of changes over there, like this drops down really a lot and then heads back up, right? And behind there, it's a little different. So I'm seeing kind of the full, you know, vision of my topography, which is correct, and that's good. Except that, you know, it kind of clutters up my section a little bit, right? Because I have all these extra lines back here. And we want to make our sections look kind of as nice and clean as possible, even though that is very correct. So you may want to, if you're doing sections and you have your topography in there, you know, you may want to adjust it so that you don't quite get all of that stuff behind it, right? One little graphic tip, right? Graphic tip number 2, if you want, and you don't want to see your topography in every view, you can turn it off, right? We can visually turn it off. And that means you can click on it, right click, and you can hit hide, okay? Or if you want to turn it off through your visual graphics, VG, visual graphics, I have my topography down here, right? And I can turn that topography off, okay? Visual graphics, VG, when we were here last time. So there is a site area and there is a topography area. So we have our site area here, which contains things like landscaping. I guess that I've always kind of wondered why we have a site category and a topography category actually, but I guess now that I look at it and I see landscaping in there, that maybe makes sense, right? Landscaping is a site feature, not a topography feature.
Halftone is just gonna be like grayed out.
What's that?
Halftone's gonna be grayed out.
Yeah, yes. Yes, so in here, I guess you're kind of picking up on that. So in here, you can turn things on and off, right? So I can turn my building pad off. But if I wanted to, and it's available, I can also like take my topography, let's turn it back on. And if the option is available, I can follow this all the way over and I can make it a halftone. Okay, So when I do my hidden line, it's just kind of a ghosting in there. Yeah, so graphically I can make it a little bit different. Okay, so there are a few graphic things that we can do with our topos here. Okay. All right. One more thing, and we'll call it a day. So we can put our topos in here. We know how to filter that out of the building. We know now how to add footing walls and foundation walls and a basement slab, right? And how to view that. One final category that I want to talk about with regard to foundation walls is in a basement, we don't just have bare foundation walls most of the time, right? You have a 2x4 stud wall that's in front of that foundation wall if it's a finished basement, okay? So I want to talk a little bit about how you can add that into your basement. All right, put that nice topo surface there. All right, here's my basement, and it looks beautiful, and the scale is not what I want it to be. I'm going to change it to 1/4 of an inch. Looks good. But this is all bare concrete, right? Let me add a couple of windows in here so that I can show you a few things. Architecture, window. Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Let's put one on every wall. There we go. Ooh. All right, so I've got my basement wall. It's bare concrete, you know, but in basements we have space that we use, and you need, you know, gypsum board on the walls, and you need wood structure to hold that up, and so that needs to be accounted for in here. And there are a couple of ways that we can do that in here. We can create a separate wall type that is a 2x4 stud wall, and with gypsum board on one side, and we can run that wall all the way around the inside of the foundation wall. Okay, so this is way number 1. I go to wall, I click on, you know, I want to create a wood stud wall, so I choose the wood wall that is most similar, or the wall that is most similar to the type I want to create, so probably interior partition, edit type, duplicate. So this is going to be a 2x4 stud with gyp one side. Edit. We're going to get rid of that. Delete. We are going to get rid of this, actually. Delete. We're going to get rid of that. Delete. And we're going to change this to a wood stud wall. And that's going to be 3.5 inches, and we have our gypsum board there. So I've created a wood stud wall, right? Softwood lumber, 3.5 inches, and I've created a gypsum board wall with 1/2 inch on that side. I hit OK, I hit OK, and I have my wall type available, okay? So I can just start, you know, if I wanted that wood framed wall, oops, drawing from center line, which I don't want. Finish face. Core exterior. There we go. Okay, so I can just come here and draw these all the way around. Looks pretty good, right? A little time consuming. Okay, you get the idea. I could go all the way around. Trim, TR, I trim those little walls, and it looks great, right? So if I look at a sectional cut of this floor plan now, we'll do that little guy. I see my wood stud wall there, right? And I need a base offset here of 4 inches as well. I'm not going to worry about that just yet. Okay, so this is great. One problem that you're going to see with that is that, well, they're 2 separate walls. You know, if you move one wall, then you're going to have to coordinate when you move the interior. You know, you have to move 2 walls essentially, coordinate moving both walls, which is not a big deal, I guess. It's kind of a pain in the neck. The biggest pain in the neck here is that this wall goes full height and it doesn't allow an opening for the window, right? So if I do create 2 different walls, then I'm going to have to join them together to allow the window to show through this interior wall. So I have an extra step here. So number 1, I'm drawing my walls twice. I then have to join my walls together, okay? So I would go into modify. There is a join command where I can join geometry, click, and I just pick the two things I want to join. Click, click, and it joins it and cuts that wall opening out. Okay. So now, essentially these two things, they have a relationship. They're joined together, right? They're still separate, but they're joined together. And it allows this window to read. Great, okay? I don't typically go this direction, but you can, right? I'm not thinking of any, maybe if you had to create a wall that was lower. This would be a good, if you wanted to only have a 3-foot wall or something for whatever reason in a basement on a foundation wall, maybe there's an access panel or something. Okay, this would be a good way of going about it because I can take this wall and define it with a different height than that wall. Okay, there's an advantage. Normally, what I will do is I will finish face exterior, so my, ooh, that wall's flipped. Normally what I'm going to do is, hold on guys, I need to fix that. So do you see this wall? When I change my location line to finish face exterior, it went on the inside there because the wall it's reversed, but we can't tell because it's the same material on both sides, right? So I'm going to change this to wall center line so that it's in the middle, and I'm going to change the orientation of it. And it will flip right in place because the wall center line, the wall is defined as center line orientation. So now when I change the wall center line location line to finish face exterior, it goes on the outside. But normally what I do is if I know that I have to have a foundation wall with a wood stud furred out on the inside, I'm going to include it in my wall type, right? So edit type, edit, and I'm going to, on the inside, right, I'm going to insert and move down, and, or I guess I could leave it in, we could do that now because it's part of the structure. A 2x4 wood stud. Okay, and I could also add, I could add some gypsum board. It'll be a finish. Half of, oop, not 1.5. There we go, 1/2 inch. Oop, what just happened there? Dang it. Typical Revit, right?
Did you do escape out of it?
I don't know. Something. Let's see, that was.
You wouldn't select it, so it's software lumber.
Oh. Oh, like why isn't it? You're right, you're right. It's only the only one that comes up, so I'm assuming it's gonna by default just pick it, you know? Okay, so cast in place, softwood lumber, gypsum board, hit OK. Highlighted walls overlap. One of them may be ignored. What overlaps?
Because you have an exterior wall,
What?
right? Because you,
Anyway, you guys get, we'll just do one more. You guys get where I'm going with this, right? It's on the interior side. Oh, okay. Hold on a second. I think it was having to do with maybe the connection over here, actually. If I would have just hit OK instead of cancel, it would have formalized the wall. But what I'm doing here is essentially I'm connecting, you know, that furred out stud wall to the inside of my concrete wall here. And what's nice.
On the opposite side, you got double walls.
What's that?
On the opposite side.
You're right. Yep. Yeah. Because I had drawn those in there. Yep. You would. So I'll delete those out. But you know, now my windows are automatically cut out because it's all one piece. If I decide to move something, it moves, right? It maintains the same base and top boundary or connection that, you know, the other wall has. So essentially they're identical. So whether you move it or modify it or change a boundary or something, that wall is identical, whether it's the outer wall or the inner wall. So, you know, the only disadvantage kind of to this wall is that if there were one wall that, you know, there was a space you weren't finishing, then, you know, you'd have to essentially you'd have to add another wall type. So you would have a bare concrete wall, you know, for the foundation that didn't have a furring wall on it, and then you'd have the wall with the furring, you know, attached to it. So I can double click on this now, right? And the wall is it's all one piece essentially here. Okay. All right, that is all for foundation walls for today. But this model works a lot better, right? And that was a user error that was happening. So you're gonna add your foundation walls, you're gonna add your footing walls to your midterm project. You're gonna add topography in there. You're gonna add a basement level, right? So you'll be adding some new levels and defining all of that. But add all of this stuff to your midterm, okay? Next week we'll talk about annotation. So I'm going to talk about dimensions and adding text, adding rooms, actual rooms to your project. So you can have room names and things like that in your project. And then that'll be Monday. And then on Wednesday, I'll just either in class, you can work in class, have free time to work, or I can draw some things to demonstrate, I guess, essentially. That's it.
So we got 13 days before project time?
Basically 12. Yes, 12 now.